Today, we're going to be talking about all things trauma from a Chinese medicine perspective, which is quite possibly one of my favorite topics to talk about in Chinese medicine because we have such a unique perspective on how trauma enters the body, why it enters the body, and how it affects our physical and mental health. And most importantly, how to get rid of it, how to release trauma from our body. So today we're going to be talking about what is trauma, how trauma enters the body, why it enters the body, where it sits in our body, and what can we do about it. So let's dive in. To start, what is trauma anyways? Well, in Chinese medicine, we consider trauma anything that keeps us from living in the present or from moving forward in the future. So that can be past regrets, something that is constantly on our mind. It can be past events that affect the way we behave today. It can be past events that affect our current emotions, thoughts, and beliefs, which ultimately create our current reality. It's anything in the past that has a significant impact on our life today. And it's also anything that happened in the past that creates fear and anxiety and worry that stops us from moving forward. Another way to think about trauma is that anything we experience where our feelings were either too much or too little, meaning we didn't receive enough. So maybe too much anger, too much stress, too much worry, too much anxiety, too much grief, too much sadness. Those are all feelings of too much. Whereas trauma can also be not receiving enough love, connection, support, safety. So I like the way Gabby Bernstein puts it, where there's trauma with a big T and trauma with a small t, right? So trauma with a big T are things like sexual abuse, violence in the house or to yourself, verbal abuse, really big, heavy situations like that. But then we also have a lot of small T traumas, right? Which most of us have experienced. We haven't all experienced big traumas, although unfortunately a lot of us have. But I've never met a person who hasn't experienced some sort of small trauma. So small trauma can be having parents that argued a lot growing up and were always fighting in front of you. Small trauma could be your feelings not being recognized as a child, constantly throwing tantrums and being ignored by your caretaker. Small trauma can be not being invited to a sleepover in second grade where all the other girls were invited. Trauma can be getting a C on a test and feeling a lot of shame and guilt and feeling bad about it. Trauma can be a lot of things. Like I mentioned before, trauma is really anything that sticks with us and creates fear, anxiety, worry, anger, and sadness in the present moment. And to highlight this, I want to share with you one of my early memories of trauma. Now, when I say trauma, it was not something I realized in the moment, and that will make sense as I explain it to you. But it's something that I now see was likely a traumatic event in my history. So when I was in first or second grade, I had a teacher that told me to my face that if she was my mom, she would wash my mouth out with soap. And this is because I was very outspoken and I spoke my mind as a child. Now, this is not a feeling that my parents felt. So I obviously then went and told them about it and they kind of just laughed it off. But my trauma in that moment was having an authority figure put me down, right? Being told that my words are too much, that they can't be handled. And then having nothing happen to this authority figure and going to school with her for the rest of the year, I was then taught that my feelings don't necessarily matter, that people can treat me like this and there's no consequences. And in a situation like this, there's two ways that it could have taken me, right? It could have silenced me so that I don't speak my mind and I don't feel safe to speak my truth, which I think partially it did, not just that one specific moment. And on the other hand, it can cause you to rebel. And I've rebelled against authority figures the majority of my life. Honestly, I still do. And to be honest, that's not a memory in my life that I think about pretty much ever. But when I was thinking about this conversation about trauma and about early experiences, that's actually what came into my mind. And now I also want to touch upon birth trauma, because this is a big topic in Chinese medicine, not as much in Western society. But the way we give birth now in Western society is not the way we gave birth thousands of years ago or even hundreds of years ago. And birth trauma is a real thing. Now, I'm not saying this to shame anyone or to make anyone feel bad that may have given birth to a child and caused trauma or may have suffered their own birth trauma, because a lot of the times there's nothing we can do about it. But it is a part of our body and it's important to mention. So, birth trauma includes things like a baby being born into really bright lights, and maybe that shocks their system. Birth trauma can be having the umbilical cord cut too soon, so the full blood supply doesn't make it to the child. A C-section is generally considered birth trauma, usually to the mother as well as the child. And then a child that doesn't get enough skin-to-skin contact after birth or isn't breastfed is also seen as birth trauma or early years trauma in Chinese medicine, because they're not getting that contact with their caregiver that they are meant to. So now we have an understanding of what trauma is, but how does trauma enter the body? So in Chinese medicine, there's 3 main levels of qi in the body. And on the very surface level, the qi, the energy that circulates throughout our muscles and our joints and finances and controls our immune system, is our wei qi, W-E-I. We can also call that our defensive qi, because it defends us from the outside world. It defends us from germs. It defends us from outside voices, all of that stuff. It also is what controls our automatic physical behaviors. So like if you were to touch a hot pan, before your mind could even register it, your hand would pull away. That's your wei qi in action. Then we have the second layer of our qi, which is our blood level, our yin qi, Y-I-N-G. And that's where our blood sits. That's where we create nutrients and blood and other resources for our body. It's our nutritive qi because it gives us nutrients. And then the deepest layer of qi, of energy in our body, is our yuan qi, Y-U-A-N. That is where trauma, for the most part, sits. That is our core level, our DNA level, and our cellular level of our body. Now, trauma can enter our body at any of these 3 layers of energy of qi in the body. But there's 2 instances where traumas will go straight to our DNA, our core level. And the first one is any big trauma, any trauma with a big T, sexual abuse, physical abuse, violence in the household. Those are all big traumas. They have such a large shock on the body that they bypass our defensive qi. They bypass our blood level and they go straight to our core DNA level. And the second instance where things will go straight to our core DNA level is anything that happens to a child between the ages of 7 and 8 that is too much for them to handle at the time. You know, we hear the saying that children are like sponges, right? And a lot of ways that is true, because their defensive qi, their wei qi, is not fully built up yet. Their immune system is not fully supportive. So they don't have that first level of defense against emotions that adults might have. And kids are still building up blood in their body. So they don't have a lot of blood to support holding of their emotions either. So things will go straight to our DNA core level. So to recap that, any big traumas with a big T or anything that happens before the ages of 7 or 8 roughly will go straight to our core DNA yuan level, where trauma is stored. Now, another way trauma enters the body is through a progression of going through these layers of qi, of energy in the body. So let's say you're 25 and you get fired from your job, and that's traumatic to you, right? You need an income. You need something to do. Maybe you tie your worth to your job also. It can be bigger than just losing your job. And that puts you into a bad mood. Now, our wei qi holds our moods. So when we're in a mood, that's really going on affecting our wei qi, our defensive qi. So you stay in this bad, angry mood for a while. Maybe you're resentful towards your employers and you just can't push it off. You can't push this mood off. So your body can't hold it at the wei qi level anymore. So it goes to our blood level, to our yin level, that kind of middle energy in the body. Now, we store our emotions in our blood, and we are meant to store our emotions in our blood. But when they stay there for too long and it becomes too taxing on our body will put them away and send them back down to the core level, to our DNA cellular yuan level. So we've had this mood, it's passed to an emotion, so it's now sitting in our blood level where we are just angry. That is our core emotion. That's our core reaction. And then over time, that emotion sitting in your blood starts to tax your blood, starts to deplete your blood. And your body is like, wait, we can't handle this anymore. We need more blood. We need more resources. So we are going to send this emotion, which we can call a pathogen, down to our yuan level to sit there and wait until you are able to deal with it and able to release it from your body. So that is another way that emotions, that traumas can enter our core DNA level. But at the end of the day, all traumas, in the sense that we're talking about, sit at our yuan level, our core level, our cellular level, which is why when we're trying to release emotions from the body, it's really important that we're working on our cellular DNA core level of energy of qi. Now, we may be more susceptible to small traumas entering that core DNA level of our body at different times of our lives, largely based on the abundance of resources we have in our body. So resources are things like jing, which is a Chinese medicine term for our essence, our lifeline, our being. Then we have blood. We have thin fluids in the body, which we can also consider hydration. We have thick fluids in the body, which we call yin in Chinese medicine. We have qi, which is our energy. And then we have yang, which again is also our energy, our fire, our motivation in life. Now, these resources can all protect us from that trauma going from the wei level to the yuan level, from the defensive level through the blood level, all the way to our core DNA level. But when we don't have enough resources in our body, when we're overworked, we're stressed, we're depleted, we're not eating well, we're not feeding ourselves enough food or the right food, or we're over-exercising and we are depleting our bodies, we don't have the resources to handle the moods and emotions that come our way. And then they turn into traumas into our bodies. And kind of an easy way I like to think about it is that blood finances a calm mind, right? When we have enough blood to come up, to rise up to our head, we feel stable, we feel good, we're able to think clearly. And yin is the substance, the resource that grounds us. I like to think of yin as a thick, warm, weighted blanket. Yin is what allows us to sleep at night. It's what allows us to rest. It's what allows us to rejuvenate, essentially. So I like to think of yin as a weighted blanket. It's what really grounds us. So think about if something happens in your life that could be considered a trauma, right? So let's go back to the scenario of losing your job when you're 25. Now, if you have enough blood to finance your mind and able to see what's happening clearly, you could see being fired from your job as a positive thing, that it allows you to get a new job or change careers or to pivot in your life. And if you have enough yin, you feel grounded in your decisions and your ability to handle what's coming to you. Then if you have enough qi, enough energy in your body, you have the resources to be able to move on from that event, to move forward. And then on top of that, if you have enough yang, enough fire in your body, you have the motivation to move forward, the zest for life, the passion to change directions and change your mind. So where that scenario of losing your job could have entered your body and over time become trauma that's held in your body, if there's enough resources in your body, it doesn't have to be. Let's talk about why trauma enters the body in the first place. Like, what's the point of that? So our bodies are always trying to protect us and help us. And if you get nothing else out of anything I ever say on this podcast or anywhere, I want you to understand that your body is always trying to help and support you. And if we didn't have these mechanisms to store trauma in our body, to store long-term emotions and moods, then anytime there was something that came our way that we didn't have the capacity to handle, that was either too much or too little for us, like I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, that would directly affect our health on a negative level. If we didn't have these resources in place, every time something happened that we couldn't handle, it would go straight to our internal organs, which would be devastating to our health. Because in Chinese medicine, emotions are thought as pathogens, the same as a virus, a cold, or any other disease that comes at you from the outside world. So instead of a small thing causing devastating effects on our health, our body tries to use the resources it has to store it in our body until we are able to release it, until we have enough resources where we are in the right emotional, mental, and spiritual mindset to be able to release it. To give you a really crazy example, if we didn't have these mechanisms in place, you could think about it as every time you have a heartbreak, you end up with a heart attack. And some people will store trauma in their body their entire lives. And in some ways, that's okay because that is their dharma. That is what they are meant to go through. And maybe they're not ready to release it. But my guess is you're listening to this podcast because you don't want to stay in that stuck place and you are ready to release this trauma. And on top of maybe feeling emotionally stuck or mentally not in the place that you want to be, The reason we want to remove trauma from our bodies is because over time, holding trauma in our bodies is really depleting on our resources. It depletes our blood. It depletes our yin, our thick fluids in the body. It depletes our hydration, our thin fluids in the body. It depletes our qi and our yang. And over time, the more we deplete our body of these resources, the more severe of illnesses that we'll see pop up. One of the places our body really likes to store trauma is in our joints, in those cavities in our body where there's lots of space to store things. So oftentimes when people have long-term stored trauma in their body, it will start off as joint pain. It could be a little bit of knee pain here or there, or arthritis that pops up, or back pain in a joint, elbow pain, shoulder pain, any joint in your body, hip pain. It may start out as harmless, slight pain in your joints. And then over time, the more we deplete our body of resources, either through diet or exercise, or by holding on to and not releasing those stored traumas, our body does not have the capacity to hold it anymore. So then more severe illnesses and diseases will start to pop up down the line. And we don't want this to happen. So that's why we're going to talk about how you can release stuck trauma, stored trauma in your body, to release your body, to release your mind, and to be able to move forward in a free and open environment. So how do we release stuck trauma in our body? Now, my favorite way, and obviously I'm biased, to release stored trauma in the body is through the use of acupuncture and Chinese medicine, which can be done in person with the use of needles, or it can be done remotely with the energetic use of the channels. It's important to understand in acupuncture that the needles aren't actually doing anything. It is the energetics tied to it and the intention and the energy that goes into that needle that is creating balance and rewiring things in your body and in your mind. And from a Chinese medicine perspective, we use channels in the body called the 8 extraordinary channels, which you'll also hear practitioners refer to as the 8 extra channels. I like to call it by its full name, the 8 extraordinary channels, because there is nothing extra about these channels. They are absolutely extraordinary. And these are channels that are developed throughout life. These are channels that hold our blueprint of our lives, everything that happened from the point of conception to the point of life where you are now. And because these channels have held our blueprint and our timeline of life, they have the unique ability to go back at any point in time and to rewrite that past, essentially, which does not mean it takes anything away from your experiences or what happens, but it allows you to see and feel those experiences differently and to release the emotions and the beliefs that are stuck to those experiences so that you can move forward. And then we also have what we call the divergent channels. Also a really cool name because they're called the divergent channels because they diverge pathogens, which again, can be emotions, can be trauma, can be feelings, away from our organs. So when our body is in danger, those divergent channels swoop in to grab that pathogen, to hold them in our joints until we are able to release them or to store them for the rest of our lives. But it is another protective mechanism of your body. And both the 8 extraordinary channels and the divergent channels sit at our yuan level, our core level, our DNA level. So they are making a cellular change in your body. And these acupuncture channels are absolutely beautiful. All acupuncture channels are absolutely beautiful because they have the unique ability to not just affect your physical being, but your mental health and your mind as well. Chinese medicine is the first somatic practice where it helps release emotions from your body as well as rework your system so that your body can create resources to help your body heal. Now, acupuncture and Chinese medicine is obviously my favorite way of releasing trauma from the body, but it's not the only way, right? So if it's not your thing, there's other types of body work and somatic work that you can do. There's Reiki, there's somatic energy healing. There's plenty of things out there. The point is to try something that works for you and just to do something. Something is better than nothing 100% of the time. But I want to share with you 3 steps that I use in my practice to help my patients release trauma from their body that you can effectively start to do at home by yourself. So the first step of releasing trauma from the body is understanding what are you releasing. Maybe it's an experience or an event that you can pinpoint. And if there is, that is great. And if there's not, that's also okay. Because what we want to get to is what is that core belief? So even if you can pinpoint an event, let's say the event is losing your job. What is the belief that you were thinking at that time that made you angry? So maybe your belief for that example is that if I don't have a job, I'm not worthy. Maybe that's your core belief. Whatever it is, the point is finding that core belief. And this can sometimes be tricky because our minds like to really hide that core belief to the point where we don't think it's possible that we believe that. And consciously, a lot of the times, we do not actually believe this. If someone were to ask you, do you feel worthy without a job? You may say no, but your body might feel differently. So I find a good way about getting at our core belief is taking out a journal and writing. Writing, how do I feel now? Why do I feel this way? And then inquiring what emotions and feelings and thoughts are behind that. And to get you started and give you some examples, some thoughts, some core beliefs that I find often in my practice are not feeling worthy enough, not feeling like you're worthy if you're not achieving, not feeling worthy if you are not connected to another being, meaning you are always trying to please someone else. Another one I see a lot is I'm not supported, feeling like you always have to do everything yourself. And lastly, a really core deep belief is just simply feeling safe in your body or your environment, which can often be affected by trauma that happens earlier in our life, or again, those really big traumas with a T, such as physical or sexual abuse, will impact our ability to feel safe. Okay, so you found your core belief, or you're somewhere along the way, right? Our next step is I just want you to sit and close your eyes and take a few deep breaths to feel into your body and just notice the energy. And then as you do so, I want you to say your core belief to yourself. So maybe it's, I'm not worthy. And I want you to repeat that a few times and notice where in your body you feel this. And this can take practice. If you're not used to meditation, if you're not used to connecting with your body, don't worry if this doesn't happen right away. It takes time, so keep practicing. And then lastly, after we've pinpointed where we feel this heaviness, this pain in our body, we want to move it out. So there's a lot of ways you can do this, but the way I like to do it is by taking deep breaths in through your nose, breathing into your lower belly so that you're not activating your diaphragm, which will activate your nervous system. So taking deep breaths in through your nose, into your lower belly, and out through your mouth, loudly making any noises that you want to. And as you do this, tell yourself that you are releasing this feeling, whatever it might be. Say it to yourself with passion, with conviction. And as you do this, feel that energy moving out of your body. Focus on that area of your body and allow that energy to move out. And then after you've done that, come back to your regular breathing. And I want you to pick a mantra that feels good, that is the opposite of your negative core belief. So if your negative core belief is I'm not worthy, a mantra could be is I am worthy and I am enough just as I am. And I want you to sit there and repeat that to yourself and visualize it. Visualize yourself being worthy. Visualize yourself feeling good. Visualize yourself being where you want to be, because the energy that we put out there in the world is the energy that we attract back. So that was a lot. So thank you for joining me today on this big talk about trauma and Chinese medicine and how trauma is stored in the body. To close out, I just want to remind everyone that we are meant to have trauma. Everyone has trauma. Everyone experiences some trauma. And you should not tie shame or guilt to your trauma. It is a part of your blueprint, a part of your path, and we are meant to overcome it. And understand that you have the ability to overcome it. If you have any questions or you need support, please reach out. You're never alone. Thank you for joining me here today, and I hope to see you on the next episode of There Chi Goes.